If you're not speaking, it would be good to keep your microphone on mute. Please use the raise your hand function. If you have a question, there's a thing in the chat. Thank you, Joe, for that. And I sent in my answers to my questions about conflicts or any interests I have. So with that, I'd just like to open the meeting. It's feeling like fall, and it's been a very busy summer. But first, I'd like to acknowledge that we work, play, and reside on the ancestral lands and waters of the Coast Salish people, who are deeply connected to the lands of the San Juan Island National Monument and have called this place home since time immemorial. We honor inherent Aboriginal and treaty rights that have been passed down from generation to generation. With that, hope we can all think about that. We welcome not only the BLM people, but also our new members. So maybe if I'll call the names as I see them on my screen, if we could have a little introduction of our new people. So that would be, I believe, Rick, your reappointment, but Amy Frost, could you turn on your camera and give us a little background on yourself?
Yes, good morning. Can you see me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, so I am Amy Frost. I am the director of the Lopez Island Historical Society, but also just a member of the Lopez Island public, and I live close to pretty much all of the pieces down here in the south end of Lopez, and really excited to see a lot of folks that I already know on here, and looking forward to just being a participant in this committee. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. And Rick, as long as you're reappointed, maybe you could, I thought I saw, there's Rick. Maybe you could introduce yourself again to us.
So I'm Rick Wigree. This is my second term on the board, public at large. First moved to Lopez in 1972, about 51 years ago. During that time, I also taught in the Everett School District for 32 years and retired 2016. I'm an active member in the American Red Cross here in the San Juans, and I practice art. That's what I do with my spare time.
Great, thank you. And Shirley, good to see you this morning. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself. Shirley, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, Sam. Nutrition Macolia, Quanasan Attachal, Nascleet, Quanasqual, Aquinasqual, Outsan Kachit, Sahwakami Chausan, E Utopasan, Quanastonau. My traditional name is Kusamat. It comes from the Songhees Esquimalt Souk area. My English name is Shirley Williams. I'm a 7th generation member and resident of the federally reserved lands of the Lummi Nation. I was appointed to the tribal interest representative on MAP previously, and I've just recently received a letter from our first Native American Department of Interior Secretary, Deborah Holland, which I'm very excited about, for the wildlife and ecology. And I received the proclamation from Obama. And I also received a letter from Sally Jewell and from Obama thanking us for our shared commitment to the environment and putting our children's future first, because we did the work for the 100th Centennial National Park Service and invited Obama and Trudeau, because they have their own truth and reconciliation that needs to be done between the British and the Americans. So we got on his wavelength and was excited to receive that, and it's going to be great to get to know you all, and good to see some of you here that I've already had the chance to meet. Thank you for welcoming me to this circle, Haishka.
And with that, Bree, could you introduce the BLM people?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I'm Bree Chartier. I am the San Juan Island National Monument Manager. We'll go over to Owen first and then on to the online folks.
Hi, good morning. I'm Owen. I'm the new outdoor recreation planner for the monuments. I've been here for a month and a half. I met a couple of you. I've recognized a lot of names, and so I'm glad to start putting things together.
Thanks. And Michelle?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Brown. I'm the Deputy District Manager out here in Spokane. Nice to see you.
And we also have Rich.
Good morning. I'm Rich Bailey. I'm the District Archaeologist and Tribal Liaison for Spokane District BLM. Good morning.
And Travis.
Hey, good morning. Yes, I'm Travis. I'm the new Public Affairs Officer here. I am on day 3, and I'm here to learn a lot about what this committee actually does.
Welcome, Travis. Okay, do we have any other BLM folks on? Great. I think that's it for us then.
Okay. So real quickly, I think we can go through the rest of the current MAC members. And I'll begin with the way I see things on my screen. So Amy, could you introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Thanks, Jamie. I'm Amy Nestler from the San Juan Islands Visitors Bureau on San Juan Island, representing recreation and tourism.
Thank you. Tom Reed.
Hi there, Tom Reed. I'm representing cultural and historical interests, and I'm a resident of South Lopez, directly adjacent to the Iceberg Point area.
Thank you. Aaron Cora. Aaron, you need to unmute yourself. Oh, she froze.
Oops, I got the video part, but not the not the sound part. Hey, I'm Erin Cora, founder and executive director of Folks Friends of Limekiln Society. And I am here on San Juan Island representing education and interpretation for the MAC committee. And I've been on since the beginning of it. Nice to see you.
Great, thank you. Tracy.
Hey, good morning. And I have been a resident of Lopez for almost a quarter of a century and have been on the MAC for 5 years, I think now, possibly going on 6. I'm appointed as cultural heritage interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth, good to see you on the call this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ruth Milner. I'm coming to you from Arlington, Washington. I represent wildlife and ecology, and I was the district wildlife biologist for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife for the San Juan Archipelago for just about 30 years.
Thank you. Cindy. Okay, she's just put a little note out that she's going to leave and rejoin. Sam.
Squachil McQuet Stelicha, Calanton, Sonanihimet Snet, Sam Barks, and Juanitum Snet, Chakusa Emerson, Jasanana Kusan Let's a Squalet. Hello everyone, my name's Sam Barr. My Indian name is Calanton. I come from Samish and I grew up on Lopez Island, and I'm on this committee representing tribal interest, and then I also serve on the tribal forum with the BLM as well. So good morning, everyone. Good to see you all.
Jay.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jay Havner, live on Lopez Island, and I sit in one of the 2 landowner spots on the board. Good to see everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And Cindy, you're back in. Well, it shows unmuted, but she must be having some audio problems. I'm Jamie Stevens, live on Lopez, and the current chair of the Monument Advisory Committee. So I think with that, it's been a very busy summer for the BLM. We haven't met since the spring. We had a lot of requests that we hope to see happen during the summer, and I believe as we go through the agenda that Bree will be updating us on a lot of these projects. And so she's going to be giving us the status reports of the monument. And I believe, Michelle, are you going to be doing the status reports as the district deputy district manager? I just want to make sure, not put you on the spot.
Nope, you're good. Thanks.
And then we'll also have a cultural resources and program status updates, which will include the tribal forum update. And then we'll follow that with our open forum. And we'll take comments from tribal representatives, tribal members, any elected officials that are here, and general comments from the public. So with that, let's get, there is an alteration. Before Jeff left, we never did get the February 2nd meeting minutes, so we can't really approve the minutes we don't have.
I'll see if I can track those down.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. And with that, Michelle, you're on.
All right. Well, I have met some of you, but again, I'm Michelle Brown. I'm the Deputy District Manager out here in Spokane. I've been around since 2017. So I'm starting to feel a little like a legacy person out here, but as you met Travis, we have a new public affairs officer. And along those same lines, I just want to give you an update on where we are at with our leadership here at the district office. As many of you may be aware, Spokane management was combined with the Coeur d'Alene district management back in 2016. And together, the district manager, Kurt Pendell, and myself managed both districts. Last year at about this time, the state directors and associate state directors made the decision, along with Mike Dad, that they wanted to split us back apart. With that in effect, they announced and recruited my position for Coeur d'Alene, the deputy position. They announced and recruited a new district manager for the Spokane district. We have met the gentleman, a gentleman by the name of Stephen Small was selected and will be joining us. I believe he is expected to be here the last pay period in November. So we're looking at probably November 20th would be his first day, as long as everything goes well. That is what I know, hard and fast as far as that. I know things come up, especially with employees moving. Just a little bit of his background. He comes to us with basically 30 years of experience. He's worked for BLM Oregon previously. Currently, he works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Denver, Colorado. He has also worked at our National Operations Center in Denver, as well as our DC office. So he does come to us with a wealth of experience. His background, in addition to his employment, is a wildlife biology degree. So he will be joining us, very much interested in supporting our programs as well as our partnerships. He is learning all about us as we speak. And again, I am in touch with him and would be glad to share anything, any questions or information you would need, if that need is before he arrives. And again, I'm expecting him there around I think I mentioned the wrong date. It's probably going to be about October 23rd will be his first day. Sorry about that. I think I looked at the wrong calendar. Let's see what else.
So Michelle, he's the new Spokane district manager then.
That is correct.
And
Yes.
will you continue as the Spokane deputy district
Deputy.
manager then?
Yes.
Okay.
I remained with Spokane and Kurt Pindell remained with Coeur d'Alene. So that was part of that split. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that. Hang on just a second. I want to take a look at my notes here real quick, make sure I didn't leave anything out. I think, and are there any, before I move on, are there any questions about that split or how it will impact you? Is there anything that you would like me to answer before I move on? I see a hand, Tracy.
Hey, Linda, that is exciting news to welcome Stephen. And in our, Kurt had been the Max DFO and was that the, I can't spit out exactly what that was, but will Steve take over that role?
Yes, it's designated federal official, I believe is what that acronym is. And yes, that is identified as the district manager of the Spokane district and whoever is in that position. So that would be Steve's position once he arrives. I'm filling in for the interim, but you know, I'm always available if you for some reason can't get a hold of someone. Always feel free to reach out. Let's see. So yes, that's what's going on with that. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. And that's what I know as far as the district management is concerned. And I know you may have questions regarding the upcoming meetings, progress with the Federal Register. As you met Travis, I'm getting him trained up in between now and when Steve arrives. And we are double checking on everything that needs to happen for you to be able to have other meetings, as well as the upcoming, and I don't know a specific date yet, but the upcoming call for members nominations, sorry. All I've heard specifically as far as the final call is it will happen sometime in October, and that's the best answer I've been able to get, unfortunately. But as soon as we know, we will definitely pass that on. Let's see, I have on here the PAO. I did mention the Federal Register notice. I am working with Travis so that we can get what needs to happen done, and we will definitely report on that progress. Any other questions or anything you would like me to follow up on? Looks like, is there anything in the chat? Let me see.
Nope.
Okay.
I think so.
All right, that's all I have, and as far as my notes, but I'm glad to answer any other questions if you have them.
So when you were saying the meeting, so is the December meeting already in the works for the Federal Register? Or I think it already was. I just want to double check.
I believe so, yes, but I can definitely verify that.
Okay. And so then at some point we need to establish some dates for 2024 to make sure we get them.
Yes.
Okay.
That's absolutely right. Yes.
You have on the agenda there's a note here about a new charter. Do we have to redo our charter again?
I'm gonna let Bree answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the current charter does still talk about that the purpose of the MAC would be the development of the RMP. And so the charter will be updated to reflect the new mission of the MAC, which is to advise on implementation projects that the BLM undertakes for the RMP, which are identified in the RMP. So that will be the biggest change. And so, yes, the current charter is expiring in a matter of days. And so we are expecting that to be the MAC to be extended as it is annually by the president, and then the new charter is being worked on right now at the national office, and will be once it's finalized and out, we'll be sending it out to everyone. So yeah.
Okay. Any questions on that or comments from the committee?
All right, Jamie, I will say that a year and a half ago, almost 2 years, we did give input as a MAC for an updated charter and working with Jeff on that. And it was my understanding the last charter that was approved or put into place a year ago did include the implementation piece. So not to counter what Bree is saying, but if you, I may have a record of any of that. So if we can be of help in that process, let us know.
Yeah, if you have recommendations that you had made on an updated charter, please send them to me. Because I am in contact with the Washington office folks who are working on this right now. And I did look at a red line version of the charter recently. And basically, yes, it did talk about implementation as well as RMP development. And so basically what we did is we took out the RMP development part, since that's done. And really put the emphasis on advising on the implementation projects that the BLM is currently undertaking.
Excellent. And I know there's always a little bit of confusion because we have the charter and then the renewal. So there's two pieces of things that need to be renewed every year. And to our new MAC members and even returning MAC members, can you explain that?
We've got the blind leading the blind here a little bit. You got to remember, like, I'm a Jane of all trades. I'm a manager, so I am certainly not an expert in monument advisory committees or RACs, as these are generally known. But yes, it's my understanding that, you know, that so that the charter is renewed annually, but it doesn't necessarily change. The original charter is written and approved by the Secretary of the Interior, and then the RAC serves the executive branch of the government and is renewed, and the charter is like approved and renewed by the president. I think that's how it works. Can anybody contradict that or clarify that?
Well, Michelle said she felt like a senior knowledge base here, so.
Well, no, I think you've got it right, Bree, but I was waiting to see if anyone else thought that as well. But yes, I think you've got it right.
Travis and I will be working together on the nuances of this and supporting each other so that we can become more subject matter experts. We really relied on, on our past PAO to really be the SME for this. And we do have, SMEs here in the district, subject matter experts that we'll be working with to educate us, as well as I have a meeting with our national lead scheduled soon. Michelle and I have both talked to them recently about getting together and just discussing, how we can support the MAC in the best way possible and make it as productive as possible, and also more learn about the bit of the nuances. And then, of course, as many of you were signed on this morning, we have the assistance of our legal counsel too, who advises us on ethical and legal issues and keeps us on the straight and narrow. So we've got support, but we're in a bit of a transition period here with a bunch of new folks and an entirely new division of hierarchies within our organization with the split between Idaho and Spokane. So we'll be having folks, here. This is great news actually, because we're going to have a district manager who doesn't have to basically manage 2 states. So I'm really looking forward to how this is going to work out. But I'm sure there's going to be some growing pains as we work through the change.
And one of the things I can add to that is how important that really is going to be. Both Kurt and I were very split between 2 districts, 2 different ways of doing things. So I am actually hoping with this one district manager that gets to focus entirely on the district, I really feel that hopefully our workload will be a little less, but we will be able to focus entirely on what we need to do on the district and the monument. And that's going to be such a relief. So I hope that you can take away from what I'm trying to say here is that we will be able to support you so much better, not having to run back and forth. So.
Right. Is there, before I go to Tracy, is there any way, Bree, that we could get a copy of the red line version? I think some of particularly the people that have been on the Mac for a while, it might be easier to bounce off, to develop comments for you if we see it again, or see what the proposed changes are at the moment, realizing it's just a draft.
Let me check on that. If I can get approval for that, I'll definitely send it out. Or if there's a reason why I can't, I will reach out and let everybody know.
Okay, great. Tracy.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jamie, that I had been the one from the MAC to work with Jeff on the charter revision, and it went even back to the last administration, things that didn't apply, but we were able to go back and forth with like a red line version and even find a few minor corrections that we felt were important. So we'd love to do that. And if you do want history, I should be able to come up with the files of doing that within the last 1.5 years.
Great, thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay. You've introduced Travis, but does Travis want to say anything, or what he sees his role? I know you'd want to get to know us and what we do, but
what I can say, and thank you for turning over, is I am very much looking forward to hearing the concerns and working with everybody within the committee to push forward on whatever the next project or need that is going to arise from this. Like I said, I still really new, still willing and wanting to learn a lot more about what our intent of this is. And I can't wait to get there to be actually offering good advice and helpful, and being helpful as well.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Michelle?
No, unless there's questions. That is everything that I had in my notes, but yes.
Great, thank you very much. On to Bree, and as our monument manager, to update us on what's been going on for the summer.
Okay.
I noticed just on my own treks around, there's been a lot of clearing and a lot of new signs, and anyway, looking forward to hearing your report.
Thanks, Jamie. First, I do want to just reiterate that we're really grateful for all of the time and energy that you all are putting into supporting us, volunteering for the Monument Advisory Committee and those members of the public that are taking the time to be a part of this forum. We really appreciate you. I think, let's see, I think we did talk about, so we have a bunch of new positions. We don't have any now that are expiring on the MAC until 2024. As Michelle said, we will see a call for nominations soon. I did want to mention to start thinking about folks within your networks and circles who you think might be interested in this, or how you can start spreading the word when we do release this call for nominations. So we're really, I think there is quite a few folks that are going to be timing out in 2024. And so, we would love to have a good, strong nomination pool to pull from to keep this this committee strong. And so definitely be thinking about that. And I'll be sending out, more information as I get it. As I think many of you have probably met Rebecca, who is our park ranger, who is stationed on Lopez and spending a lot of time interacting with the community and out on public lands doing work there. Rebecca right now is out on fire. So she's assisting the, the Oregon Washington BLM with fire response. She's what's the job? Helicopter dispatch, like helicopter landing manager person. So she really helps fire operations out there, and her skill set is one that is in demand. So we're really grateful for her support in that, as well as all the great work she's done here this summer. Also, the reason we're sending her out on fire is not only because we need her, but because this is supporting her career goals, and we really want Rebecca to come back next summer. And so we want to make sure that she feels supported in her path moving forward. Some of the things that she's done this summer. So she did represent the BLM at the canoe landings there on Lopez, and she has, I think, really tried hard to engage with the community and listen to what the community's concerns and needs are. She spent a lot of time down in Watmau thinking about managing the parking lot and safety there, and she met with local landowners over at Iceberg and coordinated some signage changes to support keeping that right of way open without without impacting the neighbors there any more than necessary. So we did do some sign changes. These are minor temporary signage change to try to get people to go left at the fork instead of right down into the front yard of the residents there. And so far from what I've heard from both residents and visitors is that seems to be working. And so it's these little minor changes like that, these little acts of stewardship on the ground and interactions that we find so valuable and can really have a huge impact. She also did some training for seabird studies and has been involved in some citizen science projects and done a lot of volunteer interaction and trail work. So you may have noticed the brambles that come off the beach down at Watmau Bay that were really thick and overgrown. Rebecca pretty much single-handedly cut all those back. So we have the trail is nice and open again there. And then she coordinated with our two volunteer groups, which were we actually hosted 2 American Hiking Society groups this summer. The first one was our General American Hiking Society group that we've been hosting for some years now. And the second was a Women's Affinity American Hiking Society group. This was the first Affinity AHS group that the Hiking Society hosted. They co-hosted that with an outdoor industry partner and the BLM. And it was very successful. We also, during that trip, were able to interact with a crew that was hosted by the Land Bank here, that was an LGBTQ affinity group, Washington Conservation Corps group. And we got the two groups together one day to do some trail work out there in Lopez, and they were actually working on cutting new trail over on Lopez Hill and doing the initial tread work for that. And it looked great when we went out there to say hi, and the crews had a ton of fun getting to know each other. It was a really interesting demographic because we had pretty much LGBTQ youth on one side, and then a bit of a more, I would say, slightly older population with the American Hiking Society group, with the women's affinity group. And I think they really both got a lot out of their time together. So was really pleased with how that all went. So yes, so we did quite a bit of trail work this summer. Rebecca has done some work on trying some different things on the ground over at the Watmau parking lot that are not ground disturbing. So she tried, basically moving some rocks, putting up some temporary signage to see what kind of response we would get and to see what would happen. We're wanting to try to prevent people from parking basically on the road going down and on the left side up against the wetlands there. The primary purpose of that is to make sure that we have access to that area for emergency vehicles, for BLM administrative purposes, and to make sure that people can easily get in and out without, causing damage to other vehicles or just being stuck in. I think we've both seen, vehicles actually get parked in by others on, the busiest of the days down there. And so I think what she saw was that there was some resistance to change. So a lot of like her signage and rocks were just moved out of the way, and people just told Rebecca pretty directly that they were going to continue to do what they've always been doing. And so, we're going to have to think about that probably and do a little bit more outreach and education. And I think when we have, hopefully we can continue to staff our summer park rangers there. We have Owen on now who, is going to be doing a lot of a part of his focus is going to be on outreach and stewardship education. And so hopefully with those efforts, we can find a way to manage that area, for now. In the long term, we are thinking about making some changes there, and we're going to be tracking both the use and the issues pretty closely in that area. The monument management plan actually sets certain standards for kinds of experiences that we want to manage for. And so once those experiences kind of get outside of what we are trying to manage for, then that will trigger some administrative changes. And I think that in itself is already in place. And then, we have also a monitoring plan that we need to kind of revitalize and modernize. Our monitoring has been going on for quite some time with our volunteer monitors on Lopez, but it was focused on the requirements for monitoring for ACECs, which are areas of critical environmental concern. So those areas have been superseded by the recreation management areas, which are the way that the resource management plan divides these different management areas. And each recreation management area plan or recreation management area will have a plan. And whether we do a few of these together that have similar goals, or if we do an RMA, like one big RMA plan that talks about all of them, or if we take on one at a time, we're not quite sure yet. I think we're kind of leaning towards maybe focusing on one area individually when we start to do these implementation plans. But I think that's still conversations that we're having, and think more we'll have to talk to some planners, some folks in our organization that specialize in planning efforts, and I think get some feedback from you all once we get this a little bit more organized and share more information. But basically, it goes like this: like in a certain recreation management area, we want to say that we want folks to have like a middle country experience there. We want visual and auditory distractions that are not part of the natural environment to be limited. And we set certain standards there. And if we start to see like an area get so much use that it can't provide that experience anymore, then we have to start thinking about how we're going to manage that. And so Watmau might be one of those places where we're thinking about this. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think that's another discussion that we'll have in the future is all of the possibilities for management. We're still gathering data, so this is kind of interesting. I think I've talked about this before with you all, is the importance of getting good visitor use statistics, and that's something that's going to take more than just a couple of months to do. We need to go through a couple of full annual year cycles once we have all of our methodology in place well, to make sure that we really have an understanding of what's happening, what the short-term trends are, what the seasonal trends are, weekly trends are, hourly trends are, what we're seeing for our visitation. And so I've been continuing to work on both training our staff and our longtime volunteers that have been helping with this program to get the best data that we can. I'm also working with the U.S. Geological Survey to look at how we count visitors on public lands in general and come up with some best practices overall for not only our area, but hopefully for the BLM in general. So what that might look like is, let's say we had a counter, and this is an infrared counter that basically is attached to a data logger along the trail that leads down to Watmau Beach. And what we found was that it was and this is kind of an older way of doing things. It's still actually a pretty common way of doing things, is to hide these counters way back in the woods so that they don't get stolen. They're quite expensive. They cost $500 to $800 a piece. They in many areas, they do get vandalized for various reasons. People think they are valuable. People think that they're spy cameras. People think that they are game cameras that competing hunters are putting up. Like, there's all kinds of reasons that people take these. But really, it doesn't take a picture or anything. It's just an infrared counter. It just basically ticks a count, a digital count, every time it notices an infrared change in its environment. And so it has to be set right. It can't be pointing into the sun. It can't be behind a bunch of things that are going to block IR or that move a lot. Otherwise, it won't get good counts. And so when we pulled and started looking at the counter data down at Watmau this summer, and then comparing that data with Rebecca's field observations, what we found is we were way undercounting, and we weren't getting good data. So if you looked at the trend of that line that we got, our graph, it was like this squiggly line, and it didn't really have any discernible like patterns in it. And so that in itself, to me is a warning sign. And out of curiosity, I took this squiggly line graph and I kind of compared it to wind data that I pulled for Lopez, and sure enough, there was a bit of a correlation there. And so I think what we were getting is a lot of counts of things waving in front of the camera. And we were getting slightly higher counts when it was windier and slightly lower counts when it was still. So we took the camera out of the woods and we moved it and we put it right next to the trail. We put it in a very simple security housing to prevent kind of, casual vandalism, we'll say. Thankfully, we have a good user group here, on the islands, and I don't worry too much about theft or vandalism in the long term. We'll see how that goes. Well, once we moved the camera, and a couple of weeks later, I went and I pulled a count just to see how it was doing. And we got what we expected. And when we got like peaks on the weekend. So there's high peaks that go up on the weekend. And then during the weekdays, you'll see it go down. And then during the day, you're also seeing variations in the time where people visit. You know, at night, there's not a whole heck of a lot of visitation. When you get into the, you know, mid-morning to mid-afternoon, that's where you see your highest peaks in the visitation. And so we're seeing us like weekend, then, you know, little peaks for the weekdays and then big peaks for the weekend. And so we know now that we're getting much better counts. And then as you see the season progress, the peaks on the weekends get a little lower, which is also a good sign that I think we're getting good data. I think that's just logical that as the weather starts to cool off, people are going to the beach less. And so we're gonna be watching that data moving forward. And we'll also continue to improve and add counters to our other areas. So, and then what we need to do, which we haven't done yet, is go out and compare those counts to field observations. So once we do that, then we'll know we're getting good data. Then what we can start to do is standardize that methodology that we're using, and we'll start to track those trends and use them for, you know, have some confidence in them so we can use them for management decisions. Last year, I think I've talked to you, a few of you have probably heard this from me, you know, at Cattle Point, I looked at the numbers that the BLM had been reporting in the past, and based on just a couple of times that I had been there, thought that they were probably pretty far undercounting at Cattle Point. I think we were reporting numbers in the low double-digit thousands there. So I think, yeah, they were reporting like 15,000 people or something a year visiting Cattle Point. And based on what I saw, I didn't think that was realistic. And so I pulled some Park Service data last year and looked at like the general visitation and road use that goes down to the south end, and basically made an educated guess to our visitation there, which I guess was around 100,000 people. When I submitted this to the national office, I got a call going like, hey, so why did your visitation go up by 90,000? You know, and I explained my methodology and why I thought it was undercounting, and they're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And so I'm actually not sure, like I've been trying to pull the data from last year, but I think there's still a bit of a lag. And so I don't know if they quite believed me or not. But this year we put a couple of counters out on the trail, and I pulled an initial estimate from the counter on one of the trails, and we're estimating 110,000 people from our digital counter. So I'm feeling pretty good about my guess. And I think the number is actually even a little bit more than that, because I haven't had time to pull the data from both counters and kind of compare them yet. So yeah, so we're making a lot of progress there, understanding our use, which is really going to be the first step in making really sound long-term planning decisions, where we're wanting to put in right-sized infrastructure, such as parking lots and kiosks and trailheads, and you know, make decisions about what kind of resources we're going to need long-term to manage, you know, our more visited locations.
Ruth has her hand up.
Yeah, Ruth.
Thanks, Bree and Jamie. Bree, I'm just curious, how do your Cattle Point data compare with Park Service visitor data?
Gosh, I might have to follow up with you on that. So it was a year ago that I actually looked at the Park Service data and had these conversations. I don't quite remember, but I basically, like, I think that they reported close to 1 million visitors, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. This is just my bad memory. And what I did is took the folks that they reported going to the south end of the island and visiting American Camp, and took a percentage of that. And I don't remember, I'll have to look back through my notes on what that percentage was. but basically with talking to the Park Service staff and just kind of looking at how visitation occurs, there was this general trend of where people will drive down, they'll pull in, they'll visit American Camp, then they'll pull out and they'll take the drive down to South Beach and go down to the DNR parking lot and turn around and come back. And a lot of those people will pull out, they see the lighthouse out at Cattle Point, so they'll pull over on the side of the road, they'll take a walk out there. And of course, in fox season, well, especially last year, we had a lot of people who were being diverted and going to visit us, down at Cattle Point because we had some pretty accessible fox models that were posing for folks. And so basically took a percentage of the Park Service's numbers. I'll have to dig back more into my notes to get more detail than that.
Yeah, no, I don't need more detail. I was just curious, because I think both organizations are on the right track to figure out how many visitors, and they're pretty shocking numbers really for a small island, which is no surprise to anybody. But okay, thank you.
Yeah. Tracy.
This is a point we've discussed before. I know Rick has brought it up, but the boaters in Watmau Bay, which is not necessarily, that's DNR and how they're going to manage the buoys, it's my understanding. But even in late September, there were 15 boats in the bay, and all those boaters do come ashore. And I know our trail monitors can write down how many boats, but the trail counters are really one view of people that park at the lot and walk down. So are there other counters that show boaters that might come in and take a hike right over to Point Coville or Chadwick, or into the future? How can we assess the numbers that are actually coming to Watmau without including the boaters?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. And that is one of the big challenges that BLM has in actually getting really good visitor numbers, because a lot of our areas, and Watmau is a very small example of that, where like the BLM generally has these broad swaths of land that don't have often like a gateway where everybody goes to. So figuring out how to accurately gauge use is very challenging. Rebecca did get a lot of good data that she went down there and did counts of the boaters, and so that's definitely on our radar. But I think there might be some technology that we could potentially use there's sensors that kind of can detect seismic movements and make guesses about use from that. I don't know how realistic that is, but that's one conversation that we've had. But yeah, there's no easy way. I think the best way that we have there is definitely that direct observational counts. And I think what we'll have to do is we'll just have to figure out like a good schedule to do those observational counts. And then we're going to just make an educated guess from that. We're going to develop some methodology that we will use consistently. And so, then the individual numbers might be off, we'll know that the trends are accurate.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Bree, Shirley has a comment in the chat box that we were told there were 300,000 annual visitors to English Camp in 2016. Is that still about the same, or is it a lot more?
Oh no, it went up a lot. Yeah, it went up a lot during COVID. We're not sure what's going to happen next. I think a lot of areas we're starting to see this plateauing and maybe even a slight drop in visitor use this year. And so I am very curious what the future is going to bring. I think a lot of people are heading back to other hobbies and things that they used to enjoy pre-COVID. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I mean, as you know, the demographics are changing pretty rapidly, not only here on the islands, but in the entire Pacific Northwest and globally too. Like we're seeing big changes in the numbers and types of people that are traveling and using outdoor spaces. And so it's really an interesting field of study. I mean, yeah, my guess is if I were to have to make an educated guess about future trends here, I think we're going to see much slower growth or maybe a plateauing in even maybe a drop in our overall visitor numbers in the next couple of years.
You might tap in, Madrona's put something in the chat that they have some excellent visitor data for Indian Island also that might help round out your database.
Great. Yeah, Madrona, I definitely need to touch base with you. So I think we can report those numbers this year. Our reporting period is coming up very soon. So we're actually putting together our statistics for both volunteer hours and visitor use right now.
Rick, there's a question for you in the chat. Can you see it?
Oh, yeah. Do you work with what's MRC?
Marine Resources Committee, which is part of it's run through the San Juan County and it's part of the Northwest Straits.
Only peripherally through conversations we've had through the Stewardship Network and the Terrestrial Managers Group. And Rick?
Do we have any idea of the use of hunters using the land? South end of Lopez?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've actually gotten quite a few, well, I'm going to say quite a few, like 5 permission requests to hunt down there this year. And I know there's a finite number of permits that people pull for this particular area. And so I think we could look at that the DNR numbers to get a starting point, but that'll have to be like observational counts. And this is another part of what the BLM does, and we need to update these numbers. And so we take those counts from our visitor use camp infrared counters and other ways that we count visitors, and we split that up into sorry, somebody just peeked in and closed the door. I totally lost my train of thought. We split that up into visitor use days, and we split that up into use by activity. And so that is done through polling, which is actually pretty complicated because we're not allowed to just simply go out and ask people what they're doing. We actually have to, there's federal records and privacy requirements. And so this is usually a larger effort that is done every few years where we'll actually do a recreation visitor use survey. And so we'll have to think about doing one of those. There's different ways that they're done. They're usually, the national office usually picks a few areas per year and assists with that. And so we're definitely wanting to get on that list so we can kind of get an idea of what people are spending their time doing while they're visiting. And I think Patty?
Ruth's got her hand up.
Oh, and Ruth? Let's go with Ruth first and then Patty.
I was just going to follow up on Rick's question. So there's a virus that hit the San Juan Islands starting probably in 2019, but really got roaring in about 21 or so. So the deer populations are down. The permit numbers, anybody can go hunt on Lopez Island during the general season, and then they can ask for a second deer tag through the permit system. And those permits are almost never, more permits are offered than people opt to buy one. So, but you can go on the DFW website, and Lopez Island is its own game management unit.
You need to be quiet because I'm gonna talk.
You can get a general sense of how many deer are taken from Lopez. And you can also compare recent years with past years when the deer population was pretty high. But I think Bree's estimate of about 5 people, probably 5 to 10, when I was actively managing that unit, would tell me that they actually went to the BLM properties, because it's one of the few public lands available.
Thanks, Ruth. Patty?
Yes, thank you, Patty Gobin, Tulalip Tribes. I just was going to reiterate that I think it's really, I set up with the MRC, the LIO, and track all of the Tulalip Tribes does what they're doing out there to enhance salmon and bull kelp and all the things that it takes for salmon to live in. And they're tracking heavily the moorages and the buoys that are being put out there. And there's always a report on them leaving and going on to the islands. And so I think if you're looking for numbers, Bree, you can find some there with them and meet with them. They're tracking specifically on the impact of visitations to the San Juan Islands. Thank
Great.
you.
That's awesome information. Thank you.
I didn't know if you were going to go on, Bree, with something else, but I did see on your on the agenda about a working friends group and the volunteer program update.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a couple more things for y'all. I want to give you an update on what's going on with our tribal forum development. So let's start there. And so the BLM has been really blessed in being able to work with the Coast Salish tribes that we have here, who've been heavily engaged in helping us with the management plan, and really been great partners with continued engagement, and have provided a lot of support and welcome for me here. And I am hoping that we can continue to develop those relationships. And one of the ways that we're trying to work towards more effective communication earlier on in our planning processes is through this tribal forum. I think the idea behind it is to end up with something that looks like a tribal group that can coalesce to be involved in a substantive way in co-stewardship of the San Juan Islands National Monument. And right now we are working with a contractor who is providing third-party facilitation services that we are leveraging to help bring the tribes together and caucus in such a way so that that it's not being facilitated directly by the BLM, or so that we're hopefully taking like our bias and interests out of that process, and helping to foster a place where we can get a really good idea of what our tribal partners are going to want and need from us to support this tribal forum going forwards. So that contract is in place. We've had some initial meetings with the contractors. Our next step will be a meeting with the actual facilitators in November to help them kind of get organized, get some of the background on what the monument is, where it is, what it looks like, facts 101 for us, and then help them organize in such a way so that they can start their outreach process. And we'll be keeping the tribes informed of this as this process proceeds. Once the tribal engagement starts, I think, things are going to happen that are going to be very cool and interesting, and it's going to, things are going to change a lot. And, I think of providing pretty much some high level, got Sam knocked out. We'll providing some high level overviews of how that process is going, with all of you here today. But, the tribal forum itself is exempt from these SACA rules, and is, we'll be sharing sensitive and proprietary information, and so that will be kept confidential by all parties involved. And so, yep, that's where we are there.
So Bree, I just wanted to back up a little bit before we get too far into the tribal forum, but you had updated a little bit about some of the volunteers that had worked with you during the summer, some of the groups. Is there any other on the volunteers, like any of the friends groups for the lighthouses, or is there any updates there?
Yeah. It's actually been really great to have both Owen and Rebecca on, because they've been able to actively go out and engage, at both the lighthouse and both the lighthouses and with our volunteer monitoring groups. So Owen right now is working on trying to bring us back into compliance with our volunteer program. And so he's been doing a lot of work with the organization of our files on the back end, and how we're communicating and working with our volunteers to make everything more clear and organized about what the roles and responsibilities are. And that's actually quite a bit of work. So, I think with the staffing changes and everything, that had fallen by the wayside a bit. So we're wanting to get everybody under, in the volunteer program to have current volunteer agreements or group volunteer agreements, so that everybody is understanding of their roles and, has in place the protections that those volunteer agreements provide. And so I think we're making really good progress on that. Owen has been coming up with some really innovative ways of organizing those things and making sure that I do my part when I'm supposed to, and signing those volunteer agreements in a timely manner, and that we're, nothing's falling through the cracks. Did you want to say anything else about that?
I think you about covered it. I know I've talked to a lot of you who are on this call about agreements in various forms. So thanks for all of your help, and thanks to Bree. And yeah, it's been going pretty well. If anybody has any questions at all about how our volunteer program works, feel free to reach out anytime, and I'll tell you more than you want to know.
Tom.
Yeah, on the volunteer topic, I have not seen updates in the last couple of years, but it used to be that BLM had really impressive numbers for the volunteer hours spent on the monument lands each year. And I'm wondering how those are looking. Are those looking up, down, flat? Have they recovered from the pandemic, or do we just not know?
So last year we reported really good numbers, highest in the Spokane district, and we have not gotten our final volunteer counts yet for this year. But we're again, that's part of the volunteer program that Owen is taking the lead on and tightening up. And so we'll be reporting in more detail, not only the group hours, but also individual volunteer hours, because there are some ways that folks earn some credit and awards with volunteer hours. And then we also want to make sure we're recognizing, the time and the energy that our volunteers give us. And so we're looking at developing some some volunteer award programs and making sure that we recognize worthy volunteers by submitting nominations for regional and national volunteer awards as well. So all of that stuff Owen is doing. Those volunteer numbers will be reported in the annual management plan. I think I reported last year's numbers in the management plan, but if not, I can definitely look those up and see where we're at with those. I mean, not management plan, sorry, manager's report. Yes.
Yeah, it would be great to see the numbers. Numbers always just make things more concrete. And if you could copy the MAC on the manager's report as soon as it's shareable, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, last year's is on our website. And I'll send a link to everyone. And this year's we haven't started yet.
Tracy.
Well, I do have a couple of questions and on that, and also some kudos to working with Owen on that volunteer process. And for anyone, and what we've learned, and we always forget what we relearn, that the volunteer hours, the reporting is from November to October, correct, Owen? So right now we're reporting for the end of the fiscal year, which is ending this month. So we should have all those numbers to report at our next MAC meeting. And it's exciting that there could be some other even local awards for individuals. Some of our lighthouse volunteers running Keepers of the Peytos Light go way above and beyond what groups, they need individual recognition. So thank you. But I also, we are running even ahead of our agenda. It looks like that I had the pleasure of working with Owen for a day last week. He passed the test coming from non-sea areas that we took him on quite a wild ride on the state park boat, and he was riding it like a rodeo. So kudos to Owen, you're made for the saltwater. But I'd love to see if there's time for Owen to speak, if you're up for it, about your background.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Maybe I'll let Jamie or Bree tell me when's a good time.
Yeah, go ahead, Owen.
Sure, I saw there's a hand up. Why don't we get to David real quick and then we can come back to me.
Hey, Owen, sorry, you're really low to hear, so you might speak just a little bit closer.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that, Owen. Didn't mean to jump in like that. I was wondering about signage down at Cattle Point. I know we've talked about it for a couple of years now, and because the main path that people are using to access the lighthouse shifted westward significantly away from the existing signage to a place where there's no signage at all. And so we neighbors put up some signs as a guerrilla movement, both to do the work that needed to be done, but also to poke you guys and say, hey, you guys need to put signage there. And so we're still waiting and we haven't seen any movement. And I know that you're gathering information, but signs can be dismantled and moved if needed and changed, later. They're relatively cheap compared to a kiosk or something like that. So we would really appreciate, leave no trace signage at the place where people are actually entering the plot. And the other thing, just a note, neighbors have communicated to me that they're very concerned about the idea of a parking lot. While we're not exactly happy about the cars, coming all the way up the road sometimes, but that's a temporary thing, whereas a parking lot would be a permanent thing. So I would suggest focusing on community engagement before any plans are made about that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Hey, back to Owen. Thank you, David.
Right. Is the microphone in the computer?
I think so. I just switched it to that. Can you hear us better?
How's this?
It sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple of nods. Cool. Yeah. I'll just introduce myself briefly. So my name is Owen. I am new to the BLM. I spent about 10 or 12 years with the National Park Service. A lot of time in Yellowstone, a lot of time at other sites all over the country. Most recently, I was in Yellowstone for about a year and a half. Almost all of that time was in interpretation, education, and public outreach type jobs, ranging from really busy at Yellowstone to really not busy at tiny historic sites in Montana. So coming to this job it's been great because there's a lot of things to do that are compatible with the skill set that I have, as well as a lot of new things to learn about. So it's been really great so far. The opportunities I've had to work with you folks on the call and everybody else have been good. I'm glad that you are all here and know so much more about what's going on than I do, because there's a lot happening here, and it's a big task to try to get up to speed. But having some good projects to do, like our volunteer hours reporting project right now, is a great way to figure out what the heck are all of you guys doing and what's happening out there. So that's the kind of stuff that I do. My job here is the outdoor recreation planner is kind of the operations job. So I handle stuff like signage eventually. We're not quite there yet, David, but we'll get there at some point. I'd love to talk with you more about that. I manage our volunteer program. I'll be doing interp education, public outreach. What else do I do? All kinds of stuff. So
Yeah, poor Owen is kind of a jack of all trades. I mean, I think we both are out here. We're gonna tackle things as a team and take things as they come up and be like, yeah, experts at nothing, but really involved in everything.
Great, thank you.
And well, Owen, and so many of us on Lopez would love to meet you, possibly to have a picnic or a hike together sometime this fall, if there's a chance. We'd love to set up a meet and greet with you. We can put the word out pretty quickly.
Great, let's make it happen.
And Owen has actually been pushing me to get my rearing gear to actually schedule our office hours for the winter time. And so Owen and I are going to be, I think, kind of splitting that responsibility. So you'll get to see both of our faces, and we will be. And I know I've mentioned this in the past, but now that we're finally getting to a point where we have, we're settling into having all of our staff here. We will be doing that this winter, and probably Owen before me, because you know, his job is really focused on outreach and interpretation and education, and so yeah.
Great. You know, we didn't schedule it, but since we are ahead, I am going to say if we could take a 10-minute break to do whatever. And so we'd reconvene it'll be 9-minute break now at 10:30, and we'll go back into the cultural resource and tribal forum that Bree has already touched on. And make sure you're muted and your camera's off. Let everyone see what you're doing during the break.
Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, are we ready? I have a question for Bree as soon as she gets back on here.
I really like this owl. This is cool technology.
Yeah. Like the way the little owl comes up before you appear. Bree, there was one thing before we go into the cultural resources is under the RMP and next steps, it said develop a working friends group. That I don't know if you've addressed that or touched on it yet today.
Yeah, so real quick, there are two bullet points there. And so first was the Watmau edition, which I think originally like the land bank was purchased this with the idea that they could like recover the purchase cost through sale to the BLM. And I think as many of you are aware, we've had some public meetings, and the land bank is up at a decision point of where they're going to decide whether to move forward with trying to transfer that into the national monument or hold on to it. This is a difficult decision for in any aspect for the BLM side, and I think that, and I heard some desire from the community and certainly from the land bank to hear what the tribes had to say. So I have done some tribal outreach on this, sent out a letter, and so far I think I've received five responses from tribes that all prefer that this be incorporated into the national monument for the BLM to manage. And so, but I think there's a lot of other factors here that are important and need to be considered, and so I did just want to bring that to everyone's attention. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And then on the working group or working friends group, yes, friends group is a very useful and important thing for us. And I've had some initial conversations with a few folks in the community about this and about the potential, and some internal conversations about how we could potentially support this through a cooperative agreement or an assistance agreement, and provide some tangible, resources, funds, basically to support a friends group. We also have, our the KOPL and TPLS who could perform some of these functions as well, and so that's something that we need to discuss with those entities, and potentially a new friends group moving forward, so that we can leverage that both for works that we do with the tribes, for outreach to the community, and potentially even local hiring. That could be something that could help with.
I'll go to Sam first with a question. I've got another question on that.
Hi, everybody. This is Sam. I just wanted to talk about that Higgins property acquisition. I really wanted to be at those local meetings, and I heard some of the questions about that property and the potential transfer. And so I just wanted to give my perspective from a tribal perspective. Like Bree said, each tribe is having the opportunity to comment. And so I can't speak for all the tribes, but I do want to give you all at least my perspective on it, and what you, and they might differ slightly.
Sam, you broke up.
You
broke up a little bit, so if you could just back up just a little bit, it'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. I just wanted to give my perspective, which might be in line with other tribes. So I just want to put that disclaimer on it. But in general, I think that the land management would be potentially more stable, more long-term. I think that the BLM is formalizing relationships with tribes that might be ahead of what the land bank is doing. So I see a lot of really positive potential in this land going to BLM, especially because it's so close to all these other BLM lands on South Lopez. And it could really, really facilitate tribal access, especially by canoe. There's a great canoe landing beach there. There's some utility infrastructures there. There's fields for camping. It has a deep, deep tribal history. So, you know, if you were to ask me my personal preference, I would advocate for the BLM to take it, but I would also advocate for it to be, you know, really intentionally designated as a space for tribes to facilitate canoe camping and cultural access to the vast BLM lands at the south of Lopez. You know, the one concern with it being under BLM is if it were opened up to the massive numbers of public that we're learning are visiting these lands. That would be the one concern. So I would just, you know, that is something I think that the MAC could help with is assisting tribes and, you know, finding ways to make sure these areas are protected for tribal cultural use. And I know there was a question about the historic structure that's there as well. You know, and there's a really neat history about a Sklallam wife and a settler husband. And it tells a beautiful story of relationship that's really common in the San Juan Islands. You know, that's the kind of family relationship that I come from as well in the San Juan Islands, a native wife and a settler husband. So I can appreciate that. Maintaining structures, put a hypothetical, what kind of structure we wanted to maintain, if that were, you know, say a historical structure like a longhouse or a historical structure like a settler cabin. I think most tribes would agree that fund infrastructure should go towards longhouses. So I just kind of wanted to bring people up to speed on that issue and what some tribal perspectives could be on that property. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sam. Tom.
Yeah, I really appreciate Sam's perspective on that. And I think that one of the challenges for whoever is going to be managing that piece of land is going to be balancing the tribal access and the tribal heritage and uses of the land with the existing current Lopez non-tribal community and their interests in access and utilization of that land and the stories of that land. I think that one of the things that we have the opportunity to do, either through the land bank or through BLM, is to build more linkages between the tribes and the rest of the Lopez Island community. And anything that starts to sound exclusive on one side or the other is problematic. And so I would just encourage whoever is engaging there to view it as an opportunity to build bridges as well as specific touch points for stories, because those bridges are going to really help us across the entire community and the entire landscape. On a different topic, on the friends groups, I would love to spend more time with Bree and Owen or whomever on the idea of a friends group. Sally and I have been involved with the Conservation Lands Foundation Friends Grassroots Network of friends groups on BLM land for over a decade, and have a lot of thoughts and exposure to what's going on in other BLM friends groups around the nation, mainly around the West. And in a way, we have a lot of friends groups. We have the Keepers of the Peytos Light, we have the Volunteer Monitors, we have the Patos Island and Turn Point Keepers groups, we have the Lopez Community Trails Network, we have the Conservation Corps. And one of the things that we will want to discuss, I think, is whether it makes sense to have one friends group or to have many friends groups for the monument, because we have many interests. Indian Island is very different from Patos, which is very different from the formerly ACEC lands on South Lopez that the monitors have focused on. And maybe there's a model where it's a conglomeration of friends groups that support the monument rather than a unified one, because inventing new organizations comes with burdens, and we seem to have some efficiencies with the division of labor we've got right now. So be very interested in participating in that conversation going forward.
Thanks, Tom.
Steve, I see your hand up, but for this next parts of the discussion, I'm gonna hold it to the committee members, so we don't get distracted on the thought process here, if you don't mind. I'll make sure I circle around to you again. Tracy.
Tom, those are excellent points, and the having the BLM office on San Juan opens up new possibilities to pull in new volunteers that haven't had as easy access to BLM, and that could be a Cattle Point Friends group. I love the idea of having a coming together of the different Friends group, possibly an event once a year for cross-pollinating, sharing resources. Owen could be a big catalyst for that. And I also want to mention, especially because we have Elizabeth online today with us, that the Lummi Island Friends group, and excuse me, I'm not spitting out the full acronym correctly, but part of the monument is the tip of Lummi Island and some rocks out there. So we have a widespread network, and having an overarching Friends group may have a completely different role, perhaps partnering with BLM on what those nonprofit grants are that any of us could be applying for, and so forth. So I think getting together with Bree and brainstorming and the wealth of information that Tom and Sally have would be great. And going back to the Watmau edition, I was able to sit in and listen to the 2 meetings that the Land Bank hosted. And the last monthly meeting, Bree gave a talk on her view and the BLM's view of the pros and the cons that the BLM sees in acquiring those lands. And I don't know if there's time today, but if there's an interest, Bree, you did an excellent job. If we don't have time today, there's a recording of that presentation, and the Land Bank can point you to that. But I really appreciated hearing from the tribes. Patty Gobin spoke eloquently at the first community meeting this month. And those recordings of both meetings are available. But Bree, your pros and cons, I was quite impressed with. And I don't know if there's time, but we still have to make this meeting go until 12 for our public forum. So if we can squeeze that in, that would be great. Thanks.
I have a question, Bree, on the Friends group, and it kind of goes to Tom's comments, is how do you, I guess, how do you see that coming together, or what we can, what the MAC members can do to help with that process?
I'm not sure yet. I'm still working on learning what maybe the best way would be to facilitate something like that. I think what I've seen, is that it's hard for especially smaller organizations to, be managing these financial agreements that we have with the BLM, because they're obscenely complicated and require that you have access to 4 different government computer systems and some organizational computer and business savvy. And so I'm almost wondering if we need to strategize on that. And I think what Tom's points was, very, very good. And, see if maybe there's an entity that could be the bridge that we need to, support the small organizations that are so vital here. And so it's something that we're still thinking and talking about. I don't know what it's going to look like yet.
Thank you. Aaron, you have your hand up, and then I want to address Shirley's comments in the chat.
Hey, just being a Friends group, but obviously with state parks, but nonetheless, kind of governmental entity, I'm more than happy to have dialogue and conversations over, friend groups and kind of the process of that. And then also every year, all the Washington State Parks friend groups are invited to Canada Beach State Park on Camino Island. And for 2 days of basically just rubbing elbows and bending ears with the director of the state park and the commissioners and, and each other too, just kind of wells do betters and our own challenges and successes that we get to share every year. This is the first year back since COVID started. I've been doing that for a good 10 plus years now, having kind of rendezvous fall to and be able to connect with each other or stuff like that. So I'm more than happy to kind of extend and help with any of that process and understanding how we build something like that for the mind here.
Thank you. Bree, did you see in the chat from, I don't want to try to condense that, but if you could address on the signage and how the training goes in relation to signage and tribal treaty rights and what she has stated in the chat.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Thanks, Shirley.
There's a lot there.
I think on the signage of public outreach side of things, I think that's very relevant to our discussion topic that's going to happen after the cultural resources and program status reports. And this is where we really need your input on our interpretive strategies moving forward. And this is something we hope to leverage the MAC on very strongly. And so I think your perspective there would be really important. And then on the training issue, this is definitely something that we've thought about a bit. We were actually hoping to maybe start that conversation today with Joe Dolan coming to talk about tribal relations in referencing, the work that the Park Service is doing, but he had a conflict, so we'll be rescheduling that, but we will do that. And then I think other professional development opportunities, this is something that we should definitely look into more, and creating a bit of a stronger network to support each other in doing our own learning and education on these topics for sure.
Great. So there's nothing else on this. We're ready to go in. You've already touched on some of the cultural resources update, but and you did on the tribal forum update, but maybe on the cultural resources update, Bree.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Rich for cultural resources.
Okay.
Status reports.
Yes, thank you, Bree and Jamie. We have conducted cultural resource monitoring in the islands during the summer. We monitor sites just to ensure that there aren't changes in conditions or to identify erosion or impacts. We visited a number of reinterment sites as well. Where there was erosion, we added clean soil and seeds to help stabilize those locations. No new disturbances were identified during site monitoring, though there were some rodent activity at Watmo Bay and one of the locations there. We will plan to do more monitoring this fall. We are also planning to do reinterment of human remains of an inadvertent discovery that was done last September. So we have been going through the NAGPRA process with tribes. The claimant tribes will be preparing the remains for reburial in the coming weeks. So we will be working with them to rebury the remains probably late October, early November, sometime in that time frame. Also, we were having a tribal forum meeting yesterday with tribes. Just a little bit of background about the tribal forum. In our resource management plan that was recently signed in January, we have management direction for organizing a group for information exchange and management input from tribes in a group setting such as a steering committee. So we have been meeting with the tribes during our tribal coordination meetings or tribal forum meetings to identify how we want to go forward, how we want to organize that group. So we had discussed getting a facilitator to help tribes organize and identify how they would like the management or the forum to be organized and to work with BLM into the future. And so we will be having that facilitator work with the tribes to get that information to help us work together to organize that group for future communication and collaboration. So that process is underway. I think Bree has already given you some background about how that came to be in terms of a contract and getting a facilitator identified. We also discussed at the forum some implementation plans for the future. Appendix K of the RMP discusses the types of implementation plans we would be looking at under the guidance of that management plan. And so we're discussing those for cultural resources management. That might include any additional inventories that are needed. I think most of you are aware that all the archaeological and historical sites have been identified through inventory. So now the monument has 100% inventory. So we know what those sites look like and where they're located. But there are other types of cultural properties that need to be identified. And we are looking at initiating cultural landscape studies. And so we'll be starting that in consultation with the tribes and the forum about what that might look like and how that will go forward. We will also be looking at other management kinds of issues such as site monitoring. How often do sites get monitored? Which are priorities? What kind of information is gathered and how we work together to monitor those locations. We'd also be looking at stabilization or treatment plans if there's a particular area that is damaged or is threatened. You know, we would develop site-specific or activity level kind of plans for those types of resources as well. That also would include lighthouses. We would look at developing site-specific or activity level plans for managing those facilities as well. So again, these are all identified as the types of plans we might be looking at during implementation. We'd also be looking at how, if there are barriers to exercise of treaty rights, how we might address those and develop some sort of plans how we might address those. So those are the kind of things that we're working on with the forum and seeking input about what the priorities are and how we want to move forward. So I look forward to continued consultations through the tribal forum. And we had a little bit of information also shared with us on a special presentation from Bears Ears National Monument. The managers there told us a little bit of the history about the monument, how it was developed, and the relationships with tribes and their tribal commission. So those things are of interest to us as well. And so we were doing some information sharing and may, have continued interactions with the Bears Ears National Monument and the Grand Staircase Escalante, who are also looking at forming a tribal commission in a similar format for that monument as well. I see Sam Barr may have some questions or comments.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Just wanted to say that was a really great synopsis, and just let folks know that there are multiple tribes that are attending these tribal forum meetings, and that we are very committed for the long term in this whole process. And part of that is us formalizing what these consultation channels look like, and really figuring out the best way to do that intertribally, because we all want to work together on this. And I think that when it comes to interfacing with the public and managing recreation, it's a real balance, and I kind of wanted to touch on what Tom says, and I hope I wasn't sounding too exclusive about my hopes for the Watmow edition. I don't mean it to be exclusive. I guess I just mean that there's some intention for tribes. Tribes are, really at the forefront of this proclamation. But that we do really, really value relationship with the public and the islands too. And the push-pull is just managing recreation with tribal access and having things not be over-trampled and managing education with it also being sensitive information to be shared. And so it's just a delicate process. And I think that we're well underway and figuring out how to do that. Because when it comes to interpretation and signage and everything, like all the tribes are in agreement that our story needs to be told, that we need to have a strong presence out there. But at the same time, we need really careful review. We need really a lot of feedback and edits and reviews of those materials, and sure that sensitive information is shared, to make sure that we're covering everyone's story. For example, the interpretive center at American Camp and National Parks, that was a very, very long consultation process, but the product is a beautiful story. And I think that we're working towards that same goal here with the BLM. And I just want to thank all of you for all the work you've put into it, and just everyone having patience and care for each other as we slowly make our way through this. But tribes are still going to be here. I promise you that. We've always been here, and we're still going to be here for this process.
Thanks, Sam. That means a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for the comments. And I think I completely understand the complexity and the need for the serious review and consultation around interpretation and items like that. There's a risk that we have to be aware of when we're doing these processes out of the public eye, that people will misinterpret them, or that people will will read their own biases or expectations into what's going on. So the more transparent we can be, the better. I understand we can't be completely transparent because there are a lot of very sensitive cultural issues involved here. A couple things for Rich. Rich, you mentioned cultural landscape studies, and I don't know what you mean by that. Does that mean how the cultures interacted with the landscape? Is that specifically about anthropogenic landscapes that we do have within the monument? Could you be a little more specific about what cultural landscape studies might mean?
Great, Tom. Thanks for that question. Yes, traditional cultural landscapes would be traditional uses of the land. We were focusing on Indigenous peoples' use of these lands. Where are the sensitive areas? Where are sacred sites? Maybe perhaps collecting areas? What are the types of things that are in the landscape that might not be reflected by an archaeological survey? So there are many values beyond archaeology, and we've only touched the base through the archaeological inventories. The next step is working with the tribes, perhaps through an ethnographer, perhaps individually with tribes, to identify these special types of properties that hold value to the tribes and how the monument should be managing those with those tribes. And that's what we'll be looking at. We'll be working with the tribes to identify those and what the best approaches are for those particular areas. As you know, we have at least 12 interested tribes, and those interests will be difficult and challenging perhaps to work out, but each tribe will have their own values, and we need to be respectful of those values, and we need to help the tribes identify for us what we should be managing in terms of cultural landscapes or properties.
That's great. I appreciate the clarification, and I would encourage you, to the extent possible, and again, I understand some of the complexities involved, to educate this group, the advisory committee, as you can about traditional cultural uses of the landscapes that we're talking about. Because the more aware we are of those traditional cultural uses and values and the rights associated with those, the more reasonable we can be in our conversations. The more that we're in the dark, the more we're going to act like we're in the dark and we'll be groping blindly. So if you can educate us at least broad brushes, that would really help. On a similar topic, you mentioned Grand Staircase and specifically Bears Ears as places where there have been really creative ways of engaging with tribes that the tribal forum's been briefed about. I think that this group could also use a briefing about how those tribal relationships and co-management situations have worked and have been designed elsewhere, so that we can at least be aware of that. And I think it's incumbent on BLM to keep the MAC up to speed on what the state of the art, so to speak, is on how to co-manage these spaces with tribes, because we are not experts and we need to be at least not ignorant as we have our conversations.
Thank you, Tom. Great comments. And in our conversations with the folks who are managing Bears Ears and Grand Staircase, we are all learning this together as we go. And the tribes are also learning how they can interact with us. And so I think it's very important the MAC understands what we're exploring as well. We may not share all the details, but I think it's important for you to know that there's values out there beyond just archaeology and historical sites that are important to tribal treaty rights and traditional uses of the land. And so this draws back perhaps on Shirley Williams' comments as well about how we provide training or training opportunities for members of the MAC as well.
Tracy.
Exciting that this is all happening in our lifetimes and our monument. And I have been reading about a secretarial order 2021 that was put out to all federal agencies to be working on co-stewardship with our lands. And that even that information sending out to us to get really specifics, that this is coming from the Department of Interior and from the executive branch to co-steward, which is a little different than co-management in my understanding, which is where Bears Ears have been, I think, by their proclamation. But not to get into the weeds, but it's very exciting that this is all happening now in how we want to be working with these lands and how the federal government is encouraging all our federal lands to be co-stewarding these lands with Indigenous people. So thank you, Sam. I'm just so pleased you're on the MAC and that doing all the great work you are. Thanks.
I don't know if this would be Rich or Bree, but Shirley put a couple of comments in the chat, and one was some series of questions on do we know how many Indigenous people visit the BLM sites? You know, go back to those statistics parts. And has the staff and volunteers made attempts to engage with these visitors? And is the BLM staff, volunteers, and committee members familiar with the history of the First People? So I'm not sure who wants to address that. I know as far as committee members, I'm not going to go with the volunteers, but as this committee has developed, and particularly people who have been a part of this committee for even a couple of years, that knowledge base is being built every meeting. So Rich or Bree, you want to address some of those other questions? I'm not sure who would be the best.
Bree, do you want to start out?
Mute, yeah, something. Okay, so I'll talk about visitors. We don't have a good idea of
I don't know if you can hear me, Bree froze.
Yeah, she froze. Hmm,
Rich, why don't you pick it up and we'll.
yeah, Rich. Can you address?
Sure, I think where Maria was headed is we don't have good detailed information about who is visiting particular parcels on BLM land. And that's a point that we've brought up with our tribal consultations in the past, is that, we don't really have a good record or knowledge of who's actually using some of these lands. And that's something that we will work on with the tribes about how we might get a better idea from them about who they think is using and how we might track that kind of information. But we don't have a good method right now for identifying tribal members who are actually visiting the lands. But we hope to in the future, as I think that is a priority for many of the tribes we've spoken to, particularly around the tribal forum, is that we're trying to make the monument more accessible and more welcoming for traditional uses and for people to go back out where sometimes they have felt unwelcome in the past. And so we want to be able to help make this a more welcome place, a more welcome monument for tribes to come back out and do their traditional practices and use the land, perhaps in their traditional ways or just for recreation as any other visitor to the monument. Maria, are you back? Would you
Maria,
like?
are you back? You froze, and so we just.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I got an update on my computer that wanted to go. So yeah, I think Rich captured it. We know there's a problem. We know that that a lot of underrepresented groups don't feel safe or welcome on BLM lands. And this is definitely something that we have a lot of thought and conversations about on how we can improve that. And certainly individual conversations, range from letting people know that they are welcome to exercise their treaty rights, including, collection and hunting on BLM lands, and letting them know that, if they run into any problems, where they can go for help, to really trying to figure out some substantive ways of increasing access from, supporting the Coast Salish Youth Corps to, maybe even providing some opportunities for tribal members to access very difficult to access parts of the monument with, support from us or potentially a future friends group. So, there's definitely a lot of conversations that we still need to have around that for sure. But we know it's a problem.
I'm just going to ask, Shirley, I've read and reread what you've got in the chat. Could you maybe just give us a little insight on where I'm not understanding exactly what you're telling us in those three chats. So if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great if you could explain it.
Which one do you not understand, Jamie?
Well, I'm not sure what the first one in the chapter 2, and because I don't have everything in front of me right now, and the exercise their rights held through treaties, and then the other two about the we the people, about the descendants, whether they're lineal or lineal descendants, whether they may or may not be tribal members. I just think it would be great if you could explain it to all of us.
Okay, so I am looking at, sorry, I have to scroll all the way to the top, and I do need to read through this document, but it is the United States Department of Interior Bureau of Land Management Manual 1780 on tribal relations.
Okay.
And so I am just briefly reviewing chapter 2 on the BLM relationship to tribal governments, individuals, and non-federally recognized tribes in comparison to the 2.2, which would be Indian individuals and non-governmental tribal groups. And being a member and resident, my maternal and paternal bloodline have lived within the bounds of federally reserved lands of Lummi Nation since the forced relocation. So I have a pretty good idea of what it is like to live within our political government. And let me say, this is my personal perspective, but when I am learning, I would say, since the unsettling truth of the doctrine of discovery, when the Europeans conquered the indigenous people of Spain and Portugal, they knew when the policies and procedures became a social norm, the indigenous people would perpetuate that violence amongst themselves and amongst other people, hence the discovery of the Americas. And when I'm looking at my unaffiliated descendants from the Duwamish territory, where my relative Chief Seattle was the first signatory of the Point Elliott Treaty, I have a full lineage of grandfathers who fought against the federal government for Chief Seattle to be recognized. There were 7 criteria that they had to follow. And as they were forced relocated onto the Lummi Reservation, it was harder and harder for them to have the full-time job to travel back to the Duwamish territory to keep the Constitution and to develop the policies and procedures that required them to be able to be recognized. Therefore, they're unaffiliated and it's not their fault. What I see when I'm looking at the conversation that I'm witnessing here, and I know it's very complex and it's very confusing. And often I find that really is purposeful, and it's not our fault that it is institutional and structural racism at its finest level to keep the lineal descendants out of their ancestral territory and to go against our natural laws of the way our political structural kinship system operated before contact throughout the archipelago, all the islands, the mainlands, and the waterways. It really separates our people and it puts a few individuals at the top with exceedingly well-paid wages to represent the voice of all the people. Often I find as a tribal member that people forget that we are, as a tribal member who lives on a reservation, that we are still a part of the public that the Bureau of Land Management or the National Park Service still serves. So we often find non-Indigenous organizations have an easier access to have successful relationships with homelands that our families were born from, because our voice is silenced. So I think that really, in my experience, when the Polynesians, Hawaiians, and Asian Pacific Islanders are able to have a committee at the White House to address these issues, I truly believe that it's time for us as Indigenous people to be able to address these equity issues as well. Because we still are we the people, and all of your staff still serve us regardless whether we live within the reservation boundaries. And it's frustrating to be obstructed because we live within the bounds of a reservation. I see so many people who have never grown up on a reservation or live off reservation have a true amount of freedom that we do not have. We have been, I'm sorry, this is a comparison to a concentration camp, to a being herded up like cows or eating commodity cheese like rats. We are beyond that. And I'm advocating to create a pathway for our future generations to to have access and freedom like everyone else to access their homelands. We invited Bree to witness the first descendants on Papiawith, English Camp, and Lethlinquit, Henry Island, where BLM land is close. We asked the National Park Service, gentleman in charge and woman in charge, how long they had been working there, how many Native Americans they see, hardly any at Papiawith English Camp, very little at the new Interpretive Center American Camp, and what they know about Indigenous people. They do not know anything about the history of our people. But the community healing aspects that we can accomplish when we are willing to stand and witness is that they learn the true history and they learn the complexities. And we almost got dismissed to remove a 93-year-old elder from an event that we had planned for a long time and wanting them out at 3 o'clock when it took 5 trips to get her down to those storyboards. And we would have had only 1 hour with that elder there of the 3 descendants that did depositions to this territory. So what we found is that often the people who steward our lands feel inept because they do not understand the history of our people, and they also feel fearful for being present. But what we witnessed was tears, and tears are the most powerful form of prayer. And we pray for healing to be present in our ancestral homelands. So I sit here and I witness private landowners who are able to have signage, things that are able to pass through, yet we still have obstruction from even having our own presence because of who we might offend, because who has rights. These are real root causes of trauma for our Indigenous people and nature of the Salish Sea. And we can offer solutions of environmental protection for the national monument, for the thousands of acres, if we looked at our relationship in a positive light. But that's what I think in regards to the cultural heritage and tribal consultation, and to also enforce. And please remember, because as a member and resident of Lummi Nation, that we have the same rights under the Indian Civil Rights Act in Article 2, I believe, Article 5, and the Indian Religious Freedom Act. So we want to have a voice, even though we do not come with a capital T. Thank you. I hope that explains it. If you have any other questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Shirley, for taking the time to do that. And I think anyway, all I can say is thank you. And it gives us all something to reflect on as we go forward. And I think part of this, of your comments, also take us into the discussion topics on interpretation planning and critical need signs. It seems like some of this discussion goes directly to what you were, at least part of what you were talking about. So Bree, how do you want to go about our discussion here?
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm getting some low bandwidth warnings over here. So I turned off our camera, so hopefully you can hear us better. So this is certainly a complex process because a lot of our implementation level planning kind of intersects and relies on work that we're going to do in other portions of it. And so as Rich mentioned, we need to do these ethnographic studies and landscape level values, intentional gathering of information exercises. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't start to move forward. And so one thing that I think we might have identified is that, we really need to come up with an updated brochure that will be like kind of our first line interpretive themes that we want to make sure that the public is aware of, that visitors are aware of, and I think that speaks to a lot of what we've been talking about today, leave no trace, information on how to use specific areas, where to go, and what the values are there that are important. And so, I think coming up with a new brochure is definitely going to be a big project, but I think it's something that we need to do. And I think it would be a good starting point. And so I think what we were thinking was hopefully leveraging the connection that the Monument Advisory Committee has with the public, and of course all of the immense subject matter expertise that you all bring to this, to work together on developing that outreach product. And so I think how that would look is one of the things that we need to sort of discuss to see, if maybe, and I think this was something that I think that what Kurt had brought up in a previous discussions was, potentially forming a subcommittee of the Monument Advisory Committee to work with the BLM working group that would help develop this draft product. And so the process that would be utilized for that, and then I think other people have already kind of touched on this, is that, so we would first gather some information, decide what the core values are that we wanted to put forth in this brochure, and then once we kind of together come up with the draft, then we would enter into some formal consultation with our tribal partners that would then provide like a final draft version after those comments from the product of that formal consultation, and then that would go to our communications department, and they would have their edits would go forward, and then we'd probably go back to the tribes one more time with the final version and send that out to our working group and to our partners for any feedback. And then once everybody had a chance to have their input on that, then we would go to publishing a small run of these. And I see this as like a living document that would change in the next few years moving forward as we further develop our understanding of the values and how we want to communicate them to the public. And so I think you always come up with an initial product, and you put that out and you test it, and you realize that the response you get isn't quite what you were hoping for, and so then you go back and you make changes to make it better. And so that's kind of how I'm seeing this process would work. And then so I think like what remains to be kind of figured out is like if the Monument Advisory Committee is interested in forming a subcommittee to work on this with us, or if we want to spend some time working on it during these general sessions, or both, or exactly how that would work. And then this goes back to the part of where I am not a subject matter expert on RACs and how they can function. And so we have to figure out how all that is allowed to work, and then hopefully we can come up with how this is all going to look. So Rich commented, early involvement with the tribes prior to a draft interpretive brochure is exactly correct. And so I think like hopefully leveraging the tribal forum in our contacts that, you know, that we would have a close working relationship, and of course, conversations about, you know, how we want this to look all throughout the process. But yeah, so that's the idea. That's the main sort of process overview and project, and I'd like to hear what you all think.
Great. Tom.
I'm feeling rather stupid here. The question I have is, what do you mean by brochure? Who are you trying to reach, and what product are you going to use to reach them? I understand some of the process conversation. That makes sense. But, you know, who are we trying to get information to? And is a paper brochure, a website? What's the way to reach out to these people? And I recognize that Amy Nestler has a lot more experience reaching out to potential visitors to our islands than almost anybody else on the call. But if we're trying to reach boaters who are going into our various rocks and reefs, that's one thing. If we're trying to reach people who might be taking a hike at Cattle Point or Watmau Head, that's a completely different audience, and you probably would reach them in different ways. A lot of this kind of communication may be best done at kiosks, at trailheads, rather than a piece of paper that we may never be able to get into people's hands. So I guess my underlying question is, who are you trying to communicate to? And have you looked at the best ways of getting whatever words we can agree on to those people?
Yeah, so I mean, I think our interpretive strategy is going to involve a lot of different tools. A brochure would be, yeah, a paper brochure. Information that's on that brochure would also be on our website. It would include a map. You know, because there's a lot of maps out there, I think we definitely need to create something that can replace all of the different versions of information that are out there that weren't designed necessarily for visitation, but were designed more for planning. I think that's mostly what I've seen kind of out there. And then there's some interim versions of area maps that we have that are incomplete, that show erroneous information, including, you know, resources that aren't designated trailheads. And so what we call those structures that you see at trailheads or bulletin boards. And I think those are a very important part of our outreach. But they're, as you said, each one of these pieces of information is going to be hopefully functioning in a different way and connecting to a different audience. But we need some kind of basic outreach project that we can put in people's hands when we go to an event and table, or we have available at our kiosks, or when we go to the fair, and we need to give something to people to tell our story. And so I think that's what this product would be. Anything to add, Owen?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, because, Tom, part of what I hear you saying is that we also need to be leveraging things like the website and these other avenues of outreach. And I think that part of the goal here is to get together some language, as you said, that we can get people to agree on, and then we can use that language in multiple places. So we can, I think we're talking about a brochure in terms of like, yeah, we do need a specific physical, tangible thing, but more broadly, we're using that, I think, kind of as shorthand to talk about this project of getting together some basic information that we can use in a couple of different mediums to reach those different audiences that you're talking about.
That makes a lot more sense to me. I think that you might want to not introduce this topic or this committee as working on a brochure because it's too limiting. I think it's a communications arsenal that you can use across a whole bunch of different venues and channels to reach people, because yes, we need better mapping. Some of that mapping will be very site specific, like at Watmau. Some of that will be monument wide. Yes, we need good language about leave no trace. Yes, we need good language about tribal presence on these lands. But all of that is going to be part of a toolkit that is the way we can communicate, that are words that we can use, that we've discussed, that we've debated, that we've gotten approved, that we can use to communicate to the public. But it's not a brochure. A brochure is one of the ways that may appear to the public. Most of the people I know who go hiking on South Lopez will never see your brochure because they never visit a place where they could pick up a brochure. Unless we leave them at the trailhead, in which case they'll get rained on and wet and you won't be able to use them. But I do think that a communications group that talks about some of these broader topics around the monument makes a lot of sense. There may be further work to be done on specific kinds of interpretation or specific site interpretation, but that broad outreach makes a lot of sense to me.
And I think you're exactly correct, Tom. I think what Bree is talking about is these are part of the products that we are thinking about. This, of course, is going to be part of the implementation process. We're going to probably touch on at least at an informal level, some sort of interpretation plan, telling the messages that we want to get across. That will be, will happen as we work with you. And then the products will be developed. But I mean, it definitely is going to be part of a process where we include the MAC as part of that discussion.
Tracy.
Well, I'm ready to nominate Tom and Owen for this project. You've pretty much touched on the exact thoughts that I've had, that a brochure is just one piece, but just think of it, I wouldn't use the word brochure yet, it's just one of the many pieces. But at previous MAC meetings, we have talked about how, without putting up no signs everywhere, how do we educate some of the groups that have been used to traveling in kayaking and other groups? And it was mentioned this type of information, possibly in a brochure, would be sent out to the bicycling groups or the kayak groups. But the different friends groups would love to get recognition, whether it's a QR code or websites listed, to be able to have just starting the process in a brochure that captures, and let's just say it's an electronic brochure, it's a website, it's whatever it is, it's a gathering of the important stories, important messages in one place, and see what parts of it should go into the tourist bureau, what parts of it need to go into the kiosks with QR codes. Let's come up as a group what a better name for this project would be. And a brochure could be part of that. The fact of a living document, let's just call it the living information that we're all would love to have input for. We have a meeting coming up in December 7th. It'd be great homework assignment to send out to everybody and not break it down to a subcommittee. Previous MAC meetings, we have thrown out there that if there is a subcommittee, we all want to be part of it. Thanks.
So a couple of people don't have their hand up, but have experience in this. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Amy Nestler, could you contribute something to this conversation?
Thanks, Jamie. First, I'm going to echo Tracy and say if Owen and Tom would like my assistance, I am more than happy to be a part of any sort of, if there's a subcommittee, anything that happens like that. And I think Tom really hit it on the head that it does need to be multifaceted, that whether it is a kiosk at the trailhead or just whether it's just signage, some printed materials, that Bree is able to hand out, and that there's also pieces of it on a website. And and whatever language end up for different sites, like that's something that can go on our website. Just to keep it consistent, keep it cohesive, and let's see. And I know I had a third, and now I lost it. But I think, yeah, I don't have much more to add than from what Tom said. But it's like, if you're looking at doing printed materials, great outlet for that is going to be the ferries, because a lot of people are picking stuff up off there, and but you're also going to want to cross-pollinate between the chambers. You're going to want to have this printed material available at other visitor centers, like say in Limekiln or at American Camp or Moran State Park, just to kind of keep everything as I said, consistent and cohesive as possible.
Thank you, Amy. Michelle, you have a comment?
Yeah, in my former life, I was the lead interpreter at both Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. And I can assure you that part of the excitement about an interpretive planning process is that we develop themes that tie everything together. And that would be an important part for the MAC members to, help us with, is what themes do we want to represent? And what messages do we want to get out there, and how can we tie them all together? And that's all a part of this process, as well as determining the audience and what messages we want to give each audience. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you. You're brand new, but you do a lot of this work for your own organization. So I'm going to ask Amy Frost if she has any comments on this topic.
Caught me chewing. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, excuse me, I'm excited to be involved in that process. Was that Michelle that was just speaking?
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle, would you just call that an interpretive planning process? Is that kind of what we're engaging in here?
That would be, yes, what we would call it. Absolutely.
And this is something that has been on my mind a lot. I'm curious, what if the monument, if the MAC has commented in the past or thought about interpretive signage on the land. I do think a brochure is actually a great idea, just because sometimes it's really nice to have something in your hand that you can carry home with you and review later, and that is not, just a website. I mean, websites are also great, and a lot of people won't take a brochure because they know they can find this information online. But yeah, more interpretive signage around Lopez is something that I have been thinking about for a long time, and I'm just curious if that has been thought about before, and if there have been objections or anything like that.
Well, from my point of view, part of that has just been this last few years of transitions and COVID, of trying to just do what we're talking about, come up with the themes that we want that are both targeted for the, for the landscape that you'd put that sign on, as well as the overall themes. If that helps you at all, Amy. Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the RMP does talk about interpretive signage, and I think that there have been a number of people who've wanted more interpretation on the land, if only to help make sure that the visitors are better stewards of the landscape when they're out there. One of the things that we heard repeatedly during the planning process, or the NEPA process, was concern that people wanted the landscape to look natural and not littered with signs. And so there is some tension between having the information there when you're on the landscape and having it be invisible when you're on the landscape. So yeah, the conversations have happened. There have never been any derived a conclusion on any of that.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is getting the Indigenous history and stories to be more obvious to the public. And so I'm just very excited that this process is going to get started, and that that there will be a process for engaging with tribes. And like Sam was saying, it's complicated, some information is sensitive, but I just think it's so important to get some of those stories out there where people can access them better.
Thanks, Amy. Bree, on this, we don't have a current, do we have a current brochure? I think anything for like the fair, or, just what the other Amy was talking about, where we would put a brochure has all been a one-off type thing. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. No, we don't have brochures. We have some old, very old individual site information handouts that are outdated. And it is definitely like, I think, overall, yes, we need an interpretive plan. And yes, it's going to encompass all kinds of things. There are themes that were agreed upon and decided that would be included in that interpretive plan, which are in the RMP. There's also quite a bit of directions that is site specific on what we're going to put on the ground. For example, like whether we're going to put in interpretive signage, where we're going to put it. A lot of that has been at least identified at a high level within the RMP. The interpretive plan, this overarching interpretive plan that we will develop and maintain and update moving forward, is going to take a while, because we need to do, cultural resource management planning. We're going to need to do a lot of outreach, and we're going to need to really make this intentional. I guess my thinking here is that while we need to do all these planning, there are things that I think we see more of an urgent need on, and that is, what I've noticed is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the monument is, what about the rules are. We need a product now that we can put into people's hands that lets them know where we're at, and gives them some basic information about the values that we protect and the behaviors that we expect from them. I'd like to get that out before we do an overarching interpretation plan. And then, like, as I said, we do a small run, we get it into people's hands, we use it. And as we do this further developmental process of our interpretive plan, then we can tweak it and update it and make sure that it stays in compliance with whatever plans we develop. So that's kind of where I was thinking on that aspect of it. I see us getting into a situation where we start, into our site-specific and subject-specific planning processes that could potentially keep us from doing things on the ground that we need to. Even after we come up, let's say, with an interpretive plan, and that's done, and that's going to say, hey, we want to put in a brand new 4-panel kiosk at Watmau Bay that has that has some more space to interpret more of the story. And here's what we want on that. We're going to still need to do NEPA. So we're going to still need to do National Environmental Policy Act on, that specific project. We'll need to, do our specific formal consultation, just to develop that specific infrastructure. And so there's multiple levels of what we can do here, but I think what we could do potentially quickly, and that could be impactful, would be to get some better information that we could have available for our rangers to hand out, and for, to have available at the existing infrastructure that's at trailheads where, you know, people can open up the top of a lid, they can pull something out, it can have everything on there that they'll need to keep them safe and to help let them know what our expectations of their visit is.
Aaron, Cora, you had your hand up. I don't know if you still had a question or a comment. Aaron, you're kind of breaking.
The whole purpose. Oh, is that any better?
That is a lot better. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, just wanting to reinforce and echo everything that people have been saying about the interpretation and kind of bring more information and access to that information in the various capacities. And you know, since being on the MAC and starting the RMP process, yeah, this is the juice right here. Why I got on the MAC, you know, is the implementation part. So I'm just really excited and seeing the team have such a really awesome background in interpretation. And you know, I was an interpretive specialist at Lime Kiln for a number of years, and also that's my whole background education wise and through college. So this is it right here, what I'm excited about. So yeah, grateful to have an awesome team together and see how things can really start to be on the front lines and get the information to people and all the fun ways that are available to us these days. And yeah, and more than happy to have one of the brochures at Lime Kiln and the Interpretive Center there, and any way we can that the words cross-pollinating has been used a lot, and how we can continue to do that as well. So I appreciate all you guys.
Thank you, Aaron. Tracy.
Well, I'm thinking about it, just a theme to add in there that is geology, the history of these lands geologically, and some great resources to look to is Susha Marine State Park has a whole interpretation on the geology of Susha, and I can spend hours poring over those maps and information. Same thing with Coupeville. How was Penn Cove formed? And whether we pick and choose a few areas, the geology is extremely of interest to our visitors as well as our locals. Could be even talks for on-site interpretation.
So Bree, would it, and to the rest of the committee, but I'm just asking in order to, like you said, to get something moving quickly and then we can develop and expand it. Would it help if either anybody could participate, but if we put together a little questionnaire on some of the things, just to get people's thought process going and send it out to the MAC to get their opinions of what you know, what should go on, what should be included in this information, and whether it goes into a brochure or just gets you know, put in the hopper for use where it's appropriate or in what form it's appropriate. And I'm just trying to get an idea on how we can move this and make sure that people are involved and feel that they've been involved in the process.
Yeah, so you know what, I think it might be a good idea to share some information, both the relevant parts of the RMP that we could point folks to, as well as you know, so I think maybe sharing some relevant information out of our interpretive policies that we have, both within the Interior Department and the BLM specifically as a starting point, maybe. And then, and of course, you know, Owen and I are always here to answer questions and share information and have more conversations about this with anybody from the public. And then I think, assuming, and it really like, I'm advocating for a specific thing that I think is a good idea, but I'm really flexible in how we move forward with this and willing to, definitely go either way with working on an overarching plan or taking, a smaller chunk of that to start with, or some kind of hybrid. So maybe, I guess, finding out a good understanding of what folks are thinking about that might be a good idea. And exactly how we do that and how we would form like a working group or a subcommittee and when they could meet and all of that, I still got to figure out, because I am not clear on how we can work together most efficiently and still stay within our guidelines.
I think we can, I think that's a good idea to share the relevant parts of the RMP with people and then solicit their opinions as to either whether it's site specific or overall themes that should be included. And that would not, we're talking about it here, so it's not, we wouldn't be doing anything outside. And it would end up coming back to the full group anyway, so it would, the public would, it would be transparent and the public would know about it, but at least we could start gathering the information, which is really what this committee is all about, is to help give input to things like this. Tracy.
And Bree, I was there at the terrestrial managers retreat where you had different stations with Post-its, and I really would like to see this as a in-person meeting to where we can really interact, even if it's open to the public. I'm remembering when I wasn't on the MAC, I would go to some of the early MAC meetings where it was being discussed on the potential trails and lots of Post-it notes and a lot of interaction. The public was welcome to come. So I propose that if we call it a subcommittee, it does need, I believe, to go into the Federal Register. If Jeff and Kurt explained that correctly a few meetings ago, but to have it in person, interactive, we can really do a lot of brainstorming with your style of getting us all involved.
We could definitely do that. And so maybe, yeah, I guess the first thing would be for maybe for you all to decide, yeah, if that's whether we want to just work on this during our MAC meetings, if we want to have some kind of subcommittee, maybe that is the actual first decision that sort of needs to be made.
Tom.
On the subcommittee question, I don't think we need a subcommittee. We don't need a formal subcommittee for this. We can do meeting prep without having a formal subcommittee, without going through the Federal Register or any of the normal FACA-driven requirements, as long as it's meeting prep that then informs the full advisory committee for any actions to be taken at a full MAC meeting. In this particular case, we have the option of not really making this a MAC thing at all and reconvening whatever group of people, whether they be MAC members or other members of the public, that she thinks are appropriate, and then briefing the MAC. I don't know what that might require in terms of public notification, but I'm pretty confident that getting MAC members together, a subset or the entire MAC, to prep for a meeting where the actual decisions are made in a normal MAC agenda that is fully FACA compliant. It doesn't require any magic and doesn't require a Federal Register lead time and all that stuff. You just say, hey, next Thursday, we're going to have a discussion with this, or I'm going to send around email with all of this. This is all fodder for our meeting in December. So participate as you can. And I think that that works fine in my understanding of our obligations and BLM policy.
So then it would be, like you were saying, Bree is sending out some of this information with some questions as to what the themes are that we could put together for the next formal MAC meeting to agree or disagree, approve or not, I should say.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Okay, will that work for you and Owen? Since I see Owen having a big hand in this too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super familiar with obligations and committees and requirements for public notice, so I'm not going to speak to any of that. But I do think that what I'm hearing about the way that people are interested and the places that we want to start lines up with how I think we should go about doing this. So that seems good to me.
Good. Anything else on this topic, Bree, or we can move on to the next part?
It's very exciting. Like Aaron said, I love your energy, Aaron. I'm also really looking forward to digging into this work and with all of you. I do, I think want to mention too that you all are a bridge to the folks that the areas that you represent, and so definitely interested in hearing any information that you happen to hear or gather from your viewpoint, and also like the folks that you represent.
Great. I don't see any other questions or anything. Thank you, Bree. That was a great topic to bring up, and it's one we've been, as far as implementation, has come up very often. So anyway, we'll move on to our open forum, and I don't know if this is a crossover, but the number one is we'll take comments from any tribal representatives. If you could just raise your hand if you wish to make a comment, and then we'll go on to any of the tribal members that are part of the MAC. And I noticed it just kind of finishing up the last topic. Shirley Williams is the wildlife and ecology representative, and she said, please email me your thoughts and ideas of what you imagine I can bring to the table. Thank you, Shirley. And Shirley, we would be looking to what your thoughts and ideas are on what needs to be the themes and what needs to be covered in this information. So let me see here. Let's see. So are there any tribal representatives that would like to make comments at this time? I know that Patty was here.
Yeah, hi, this is Sam. I just wanted to say that that I like a lot of the ideas that were discussed about the brochure and everything, and I would be happy to be involved in that and bring those materials to the tribal forum to make sure that we have review on that as well. Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, Sam. That's a great offer there.
This is Patty.
Hi, Patty.
I'm sorry, but we're having some technical difficulties with our Zoom, and so I had a 15-minute drive down here to get to my desk. And so I don't know how to use Zoom on my phone. I can't seem to get anything, but I was listening to the conversation, and I think anybody that knows me, I say this very respectfully, but a brochure wouldn't be a brochure without the Coast Salish story being told within a brochure. So Tulalip is very excited to be a part of this because it's a wonderful opportunity to tell the whole story of the San Juan Islands. And so whether it's about Lopez or any of the other islands, our footprint and our story is so critical to the history and to the enjoyment of the islands. And so Tulalip's up to doing that. And through our experience with American Camp, I can only speak for Tulalip, but all the tribes were involved. It was a long, tedious process, but we did it. And it's I think it's a great accomplishment, the American camp, and how they told the story of the history of the island there in Friday Harbor.
Thank you, Patty, and thanks for that offer. And you may not have the camera, but your voice was loud and clear, so thank you. Any other tribal representatives or members of the committee, tribal members that wish to have a comment at this point? Okay, any elected officials? And I did see Cindy Wolf as a county council member. I'm not sure if she is still on. Cindy, do you wish to make any comments or observations?
Oh, caught me off guard there. Hold on just a moment. Hey, thank you very much. This has been a very informative session. I'm glad to hear thoughtful conversation moving forward with tribal consultation on ownership of Watno. And the other information about visitor management is also very informative. And we just released the draft copy of the destination management plan that's been in the works with the county for a couple of years now. And so I would remind everybody that it's available for perusal and comment. And you're also well informed. It would be, it's really important to have your voices. Thank you. And thank you, Chair Stevens. Welcome back from Egypt.
Thank you. Okay, if I didn't see any other elected officials or their representatives in participants. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to the public. And number one is, so if you could raise your hand if you're a member of the public and would like to make a comment on anything to do with the National Monument or what we've discussed today. However, I did promise Steve that I would come back to him first if he's still, it looks like you're still on the call, Steve, and it'd be great. So I'll start with Steve.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for my overabundant enthusiasm raising my hand earlier. I'd like to go back to the Higgins property and the possible transfer of the land to the BLM. My concern is that what can we do to know that the BLM will keep permanent control of that land? We have politicians in Washington, D.C. that periodically suggest selling off all of our public lands to satisfy the national debt. Is the federal government, are they required to obey all covenants that might be placed on it, any conservation easements? What I don't know the situation of how permanent that transfer to the BLM could be.
I think since we've got a lot of time, Bree, do you want to comment on that? I have my own comment in that in the proclamation, it says that the monument cannot get any smaller. You can exchange properties, but it cannot get any smaller. It can only grow. So if there's any additional thing from the BLM on that.
Bree, did you want to tackle that, or do you want me to?
Sure. You know, that Jamie, I think that's a great starting point, is that the presidential proclamation puts in very strong protections for the national monument. It also does state in the proclamation that if we acquire new lands, that they will be incorporated into the national monument. So for this potential acquisition or any others, once they become owned by the BLM, they become part of the national monument. Then their management going forward is accounted for in a small way in the management plan, but it would require like plan maintenance moving forward to talk about specific decisions on managing new areas, which would of course go through both our public processes with NEPA and everything else. also, I think looking back, on, I think it was very scary and controversial, what happened with Bears Ears under the previous administration and other national monuments. But I do want to point out that the San Juan Islands was never on that list that was included for recommended reductions or changes. I think there's been always pretty clear support for the national monument here. I think due in a large part because of the stewardship of all of you. And there's little controversy about whether this monument should get smaller or not here. And so there's that added level of protection, really, which I think is almost like the first line of defense. And then that combined with the monument proclamation, and then of course the BLM hasn't been in the business of selling land for decades. We are definitely in a phase of where we're spending a lot more time and energy on our national landscape conservation system, the National Conservation Land System, that is just growing and increasing year by year.
Thank you. Krista Campbell.
Thank you, Jamie. I just want to make a comment also about the Higgins property. I am Krista Campbell, live on Lopez, and currently a member of the Land Bank Commission. I think I would just like to say that I believe both the Land Bank and BLM would provide excellent management of that particular property. I would like to acknowledge that the Land Bank is less experienced working with the tribes, and I envy their access to the tribal forum. I believe that we can gain that experience by doing in collaboration and through education with the tribal representatives. Tribal participation in this property has been a key focus since even before acquisition, as we looked at it as a possible acquisition. Tribal participation in the development of the management plan has always been a key focus for the Land Bank. And local management has also been a key focus because it is kind of a dearly loved piece of property by our community. But I do acknowledge that the Land Bank has access to perhaps broader resources. But in listening to this conversation, I feel the Land Bank might be a bit more nimble than the Bureau of Land Management in terms of process. The immediate difficulty that we're facing right now as a commission is that we have been granted $1.5 million in grant money to help offset some of the purchase price of $2.5 million. And we need to make a final acceptance of that grant next month. And currently, at least in my understanding, I know there's enthusiasm from BLM about this property, but we have no written guarantee or agreement with BLM that the purchase is actually going to go through. And I think we're looking at something, final decisions being made in 2025, 24, 25. So we're operating potentially in making a great leap of faith in foregoing the grant funding and hopefully finalizing a purchase or a transfer of the property to BLM sometime in the future. So that's kind of where we sit. And I have just appreciated all the discussion I've heard today. And knowing that the tribes have been asked for their input on their support or how they feel about BLM managing the property, it sounds like Bree's been receiving letters of support, which I think is awesome. I would just like to say that should the Land Bank decide next month to retain ownership, that I hope that decision, if it's made, I can't speak for the commission, but I hope that it won't be viewed as a disregard for any of the support that is expressed by any of the tribes. I think we will take all of anything that comes back to Bree from tribal representatives will be, if she's sharing it freely, will be given really serious consideration. But that's a concern I have right now, that we may be perceived as disregarding tribal input from the get-go. So That's all I have to say. Thank you. It's been a great meeting to listen to.
Thank you, Krista, and thanks for hanging in there. Steve, you have another comment?
Yeah, I just want to point out that still we have received no guarantees that, given the vagaries of who sits in the Oval Office, leads the Senate and the House, that the future of the Higgins property under BLM could not be changed to private ownership. Because of that, and being more enthusiastic about local control over such a resource as a Higgins property, it just seems that it could be a bad idea to change the land to be under the BLM auspices.
I would just add to that, Steve, that the land bank has no guarantees because in their charter is that they can acquire properties, conservation easements, and sell them. So there's kind of, if you're looking at it from a no guarantee point, there's a no guarantee with either ownership then.
It's still sent.
Yeah, but we know the people who work in the land bank and for the county, and local control has, I think, better checks and balances in this case than ownership by the BLM might have.
Thank you for your comments. I just wanted to add that in there, that's all.
Okay, thank you for that.
It's Sally or Tom. I guess Sally, probably. David, could you mute yourself?
I know, and then I wrote back and a couple of people.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sally Reeve, I believe that you've got your hand up. Or is that Tom?
It's Sally, and she appears to be muted.
All right. Oh, she unmuted for a second.
I might invite her over to my computer so she can make her comment here. You can continue on while she wanders over to a different part of the house.
Okay. I don't have any other hands up at the moment. Is there anybody else who would like to comment on anything to do with the monument or anything in today's meeting? Michelle, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to comment. I know that I don't have a crystal ball, so I cannot say absolutely that the Higgins property will, something will happen in the future with BLM, but I can tell you that it has never been an issue out of the 6.5 years that I've been here that there was a question about the monument or acquisitions that we may make. It's always been discussed about, okay, if we do make additional acquisitions, they will remain with the monument. And I don't know if this is going to make you feel any better, but in the future, if there's a completely different administration and if things are discussed, even at that time, it would take an act of Congress basically for anything to change. And as we all know, that could be decades in the works. So at this point, I can tell you that it is highly, 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 highly unlikely that should the BLM acquire that land, that it would ever leave. It would remain with the American public.
Thank you. Tom, is Sally made it over?
Yeah, hi, thank you. This question has come up before in the public discussion and in the MAC meetings. And this is how BLM, and if BLM is soliciting public input and giving the public information about the resource management plan. I wasn't able to attend the terrestrial managers meeting, which I think there was a very good presentation about the RMP to selected individuals who are there, but there are many people in the community who would like information about what is in the RMP first, and second, what are the implementation plans? What are the priorities? And I haven't seen any outreach to the public in these areas, and I'm concerned that the BLM and our community will be losing the deep respect that is present for the monument for many people in the islands, tribal and residents and visitors, when there is not this public outreach happening. And I also am wondering, what is the MAC doing as far as giving its input into implementation plan priorities, and helping BLM set the timelines and determine what implementation plans will be developed and when they will be developed? I think that would be very helpful. The second item has to do with the Friends group. And we had thought of many different options. And one is an umbrella organization, which could then allow for supporting organizations underneath it, such as Keepers and Turnpoint and Indian Island and things like that. So they could still retain their own identity. It brings a lot of challenges with it, but it is a possibility. The one concern I have about a Friends group is something that came up specifically like 2 years ago, in which a BLM person said, well, if you had a Friends group and you fundraised and you came up with this money, you could get your seasonal ranger. And I just don't see a Friends group as taking away BLM's responsibility to adequately fund and staff the San Juan Islands National Monument. I think the Friends group can be very beneficial and could be very helpful, but it is not the funding source where BLM takes away from monies that should be dedicated to the monument, and says, well, in lieu of those monies, you just have a Friends group. So I hope that BLM considers that when they're looking at Friends groups options. And again, I don't know that, how the process should go forward on a Friends group, but there are lots of different options there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Do you have any comment, Bree?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been kind of fascinated. Yesterday we interacted a bit with the Washington Maritime Heritage area, and the way that's kind of operated through a local NGO, and how they can support entities within that area through their own grant making processes, which comes from NPS funding. And so that definitely piqued my interest, and it's because I see a real challenge, as I mentioned, and I've been working with a couple of local organizations on trying to get some grants going, and managing the grant process is very challenging for folks. And so I would like to see if we can provide more support, both directly and indirectly, on helping folks through financially through different vehicles. And it's just something I need to learn more about and figure out how it's going to work here.
Any other comments, questions from the public or the committee for that matter?
I do want to say that Cindy put in the link for the destination area management plan in the chat. So if anybody is interested in that, and there's a lot of interconnection in the themes that we're talking about here today. And so definitely, since we have such a great brain trust, if you can take a look at that and provide comment.
Thank you, Tracy. You have a comment or question?
Yeah, just this is kind of at the end of the meeting question. Who is in charge of the Zoom today? Is that Bree? Is that you or Linda?
Rich and I, yeah.
All right. Well, don't leave until I get everything situated on the recording. I've also normally been able to record and save all the captions, which don't have all the correct spelling, but it's a great record for easy access. And I also in the past have been able to copy the important pieces out of the chat to be able to send out to the MAC members so that we can go and make sure we get to these great links and information. Today, I'm not able to copy the chat. So in the future, that is something on your end, whoever's managing the Zoom can give permission to copy, any of us copy from the chat. So that's my comment, just if whoever's got the Zoom going, I can get this recording out to the BLM to post on our website. But if anyone's on this call today that, or you know of someone that would like a recording, please let me know.
Great. And I just noticed Rich said he's copying the chat since he's one of the managers here.
Great, and I can copy it at the very end, but individually you can't copy out these links and, well, you can get to the links, but you can't just copy any of the conversations or even the email addresses. So housekeeping.
Yeah, it's kind of housekeeping, but Rich, how would that be available if you're copying it?
I can share it with you and Tracy.
Great, thank you. Any other comments before we wrap up? Any closing comments, Bree?
As always, really appreciate you all. You know, we're excited to have our full team here, and I think we're both really looking forward to engaging with all of you. And Sally, I hear you on the RMP and on our outreach, and it's definitely something that hopefully we can combine our office hours on other islands with. I was thinking maybe a book club of sorts, and hopefully maybe we can even start with some time to talk about the management plan.
We had one more question or comment pop up. Elizabeth Filanowski.
Hi, I've been watching from Lummi Island. I'm on the board of directors of the Lummi Island Heritage Trust, which is the land trust on the island. And I'm sorry, but I just thought of something that I wanted to ask about. My husband and I were over anchored in Stewart Island, in Reed Harbor on Stewart Island this summer, and we went over to Gossip Island and walked around Gossip Island, which is one of the tiny little islands there. There's a beautiful, very, very old juniper tree there. And I took a number of pictures, and we walked around the corner of it and saw that somebody had carved their initials into it, which was pretty appalling. But my question is, when something like that happens, does the monument have some way to repair damage for things like that? And how should that be? Should I report that sort of thing, or what's the mechanism? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like we should get in contact with each other. But yeah, on this, I think there are specific kinds of damage. It sort of depends, obviously. But we do have this amazing network. And so if you do see things like this, we'd love to get reports. We'd love to get good information on the location and data. If it turns out that it's something that's outside of the national monument or not in our jurisdiction, we have these great networks through the Trust No Managers Group and through our interagency ties, where we can pass that information along to the right folks. So one of the great things about being here in the islands is we all manage these lands in great partnerships. And so I know regularly I field calls for DNR, and they field calls for me, and we're always referring folks to the correct agency. And so we're definitely, don't be shy about calling us up and asking us and, letting us know about things in the islands.
Great. And Michelle, I'm glad you had your hand up because I was going to circle back to you as we close anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I did have a question first off. Shirley had some great questions in the chat, and some of them were specific to BLM staff. And I just wanted to ask Shirley how she would like us to respond to her on those questions.
Was that to do with the staff training and understanding? Right?
Yes, exactly.
I really think it would be nice if anybody would be able to email me what they're witnessing and just be able to review that and come up with some ideas and thoughts and feedback and kind of start learning together and working together in a good way to address any deficits that might appear.
That's great. Thank you. And I will be talking with Rich Bailey here and yeah, let's build on that. Thank you for your comments.
Do you have any closing comments, Michelle?
I do. I just wanted to thank everybody for their time today. I really enjoy the collaborative process. I love the fact that everyone is passionate about this land and wants to care for it. I know that we are once again in a transition with new leadership, but I can definitely let you know that both Steve and myself are dedicated to the monument and supporting it, as well as this body. So please never hesitate to reach out with questions or comments. But again, thank you very much all for your time today. And thank you for having me with this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy.
Yes, this is regarding MAC meetings for the first half of 2024. In previous meetings, we have agreed that we do prefer putting in for 2 meetings at a time to get into the Federal Register, given how much time it takes. And with a full quorum now, it's excellent to have all 12 members. So with Tom's help, I recommend that we get out a doodle poll here shortly for, we've sort of been on a rhythm of having meetings into January, first part of February, end of April, first part of May, skipping the summer, coming into end of September and October and December. We can always cancel a meeting if for some reason we get it into the Federal Register. So I'm proposing making a motion that we here between now and our next meeting, we have a doodle poll, get some dates figured out when most of us can think we're available, and send that off to Linda and Travis as well as Bree, get Bree's schedule as well.
Tom, are you willing to do that? Number one.
Yeah, sure. I can do the doodle poll. Tracy, reach out to me with whatever ranges you want me to put options in for.
Great. And I'll pass that to Travis as well as Bree, make sure they don't have some conflicts before we nail some dates down. Generally, we put out at least 3 different dates, Wednesdays and Thursdays, toggle with Sam. Sometimes he has a conflict. So I like sticking with a Wednesday, Thursday, if we can do that.
Anybody who would not like to do that on the committee? Okay, so doing a Zoom default, we'll go ahead with the doodle poll then.
And last question, I suppose we got into this issue with the September meeting that we had put in last probably February to get the May and this meeting on the Federal Register, and what we call it is important. And if we were going to meet in person or a hybrid or only Zoom was important to figure out. And so Bree, or refresh my memory, and Linda, when we give you the approval to put in, what's our widest classification? If we want to meet in person or we want to do hybrid?
I think we would like to try to move towards hybrid meetings. So I think I think it would be great for folks to be able to get here if they can. And I think, there was a going, I think it would definitely be great when we have Joe here, to be able to meet in person. So hoping we can just aim for hybrid meetings from here on out.
Great, and that means we could decide most of us are on Zoom or most of us are in person. It gives us that flexibility. That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I will just echo the comments that have been made. Thanks to all of you. It was great to have a full complement of MAC members today. And looking forward to our next meeting, possibly being a hybrid so that people are in person. There's going to be information coming out to the MAC committee based on what we discussed today, least of which is the doodle poll, as well as some of the RMP to get comments for what the themes should be for both the brochure and elsewhere. But anyway, with all of that, we've used up our 30 minutes, and thank you all for your time and commitment to the MAC. And remember, Tracy, Rich, and Bree need to stay on for a minute.
Thanks for the reminder. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, for helping out with the scheduling.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
all.
everyone. Bye.
Cindy, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.